Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins with a dead man, with his eyes open and one photographer taking his pictures. Later, Joe Merriweather, an FBI special agent, and Agent Catherine Cowles, a criminal psychologist, arrive to investigate. They discover the man was killed similarly to other recent murders in the town, all done meticulously without leaving evidence. Realizing they're dealing with a serial killer, they struggle to find leads. In a desperate move, Agent Joe turns to his old friend, Dr. John Clancy, a psychic who can see into the past and future. While Catherine doubts Clancy's abilities, Joe believes in his track record of helping solve crimes. The next day, Joe drives with Catherine to Dr. John's mountain home. John moved there after his daughter's tragic death from leukemia, which also caused his marriage to end. When they reach his house, they try to persuade him to assist in the murder case, but he's hesitant, seeking peace. However, when Catherine lightly taps him while handing over the case file, he has a sudden vision of her potential death, a violent future event with blood spilling down her forehead. Despite his initial refusal, they leave the file with him. Later, as he reminisces about his daughter, he has visions of her both joyful and in pain. In a strange turn, a line from the case file coincides with a song he's listening to, sparking his interest. Stepping outside, he sees a vision of a mysterious man, possibly the killer. Intrigued by these connections, he decides to help the detectives catch the serial killer. The next day, he joins the detectives in the city, for a case briefing. Catherine outlines the killer's consistent method, triggering a vision for John, of a child enjoying ice cream before their death. They then revisit the first crime scene, but John's search yields no results, except for a lighthearted comment about the victim's hat preference. Over a meal in the rainy streets, Joe's touch prompts Dr. John to envision Joe's potential death in a hospital, a troubling secret he keeps to himself. Walking back to his room, he experiences more visions related to the killer, including the word Atticus, and a moving train. During sleep, he witnesses a drowning woman seeking aid. Upon waking, a call alerts them to another murder, where they find a note indicating the killer's anticipation of their arrival. Dr. John touches the victim, Victoria Raymond, and sees her final moments in the bathtub, unaware of her husband's betrayal. Detectives suspect Victoria's husband, David, who confesses to leaving her for another person, but hides the full truth, including his HIV status, and his new partner's gender. Fearing Victoria's emotional instability, Dr. John uncovers the complete story through a vision triggered by touching David's pen. After their investigation, John and Joe head to Joe's home for breakfast. Joe lives happily with his family. While eating, John mentions that all the murder victims seem to have serious illnesses, except for the child. It seems the killer targets people with chronic illnesses. To confirm this, they need to check if the child was sick too. So John and Catherine drive to the child's family, to ask permission to examine the body. On the way, she asks about his ability. He explains it's not magical, just a strong form of human intuition. They arrive at the child's home, but the mother, Ellis, hesitates due to religious beliefs, trusting in God's plan. John shares his own story of losing his daughter to leukemia, explaining that medical procedures wouldn't change God's plan, but could help solve the mystery, and she finally agrees to let them examine the child. At the lab, they perform an autopsy to find out more. Dr. John gets a message from the killer, urging him to check the child's brain. They discover a hidden tumor, confirming the killer's pattern of targeting the chronically ill. John also realizes the killer can predict their moves, leading him to consider quitting, to avoid falling into a trap. Catherine confronts him, frustrated by his decision to leave. He explains the killer's twisted belief, that they're mercy killings, sparing victims from suffering. Emotional, she presses him for more information, and he reluctantly reveals her painful past of giving up a child for adoption. The next day, Joe and the police raid what they think is the killer's hideout, but find a gruesome scene with no sign of the culprit. Desperate, Joe convinces John to help again, who, experiencing visions related to the case, agrees. They follow a new lead to a park, where they find snail poison in the victim's bathwater, linked to a flower in the park. John touches the flower, and sees a clue in a nearby garbage can, the lower half of a dress from the earlier crime scene. The team employs a police dog to track the owner of the discarded dress, leading them to a studio. However, their search yields nothing. Suddenly, the suspect Linus Harp, holding a frog mug, exits a neighboring studio, a scene foreseen by John. Linus shoots Agent Joe, and flees before they can catch him. John and Catherine pursue him in a car, using John's ability to locate him. After an intense chase, they apprehend Linus, but John senses he'll be shot. He takes cover as Catherine subdues Linus, realizing he's not the killer, as he couldn't anticipate being shot. Later, John visits Joe in the hospital, discovering he is terminally ill with stage 4 cancer. He entrusts John with his family's care after his passing. John confides in Catherine about his daughter's death vision, revealing that he foresaw a shadow around her during childhood, which manifested in her leukemia as a teenager. The next day, they attend Joe's funeral, where John feels reassured, knowing Joe's son Kevin will be alright. He witnesses visions of Joe's funeral unfolding, feeling a strange sense of confirmation. At night, John mourns Joe's death at a bar, when the killer, Charles Ambrose, suddenly appears. Charles explains his murders as acts of mercy, fulfilling victims' future pleas to end their suffering. He admits it's not easy for him, but he believes it's the ultimate act of love. While contemplating the future, John realizes the killer has anticipated every possible escape route. In a desperate move, he tries to stop Charles, but is thwarted when Charles tricks the police into believing John is armed. Charles escapes, while John is apprehended. The next day, Catherine and the police finally have a lead on Charles's appearance, thanks to a bar waitress. They are instructed to trace his identity to the chronically ill victims he targeted. Meanwhile, John focuses on his visions to locate Charles. He sees a vision of someone poisoning champagne, and moments later, a sick wealthy man drinks from a poisoned glass. John intervenes just in time, causing Charles to flee, and John gives chase. Catherine, determined to uncover the truth, finally uncovers the real identity of Charles. In a joint effort with the police, she raids his apartment, only to find a pre-recorded message awaiting her. Charles, far from being a psychopath or antisocial, reveals himself as a regular person, driven by empathy for others' suffering. Meanwhile, John, haunted by memories of his daughter's pain, pursues Charles through the streets. As the chase intensifies, Charles manipulates a hapless cop into unwittingly aiding him. Catherine receives a tip on Charles's whereabouts, prompting her to race to the scene. Charles boards a train, with John close behind. A gunshot from Charles causes chaos, clearing the train except for John. The train departs, bound for the next station, where police are preparing to confront Charles. Despite warnings to stand down, Catherine refuses to relent, determined to confront the situation head-on. On the train, Charles discloses that he expects John to end his life upon reaching the next station. Shockingly, it emerges that the killer is also terminally ill, reliant on John to fulfill this final request. John is plagued by a premonition that Charles will target Catherine upon arrival. Driven by this ominous vision, he confronts the inevitable. As the train pulls into the station, his fears materialize. With no alternative, he acts swiftly, saving Catherine from harm by neutralizing Charles. In the aftermath, Catherine emerges unscathed, while John sustains minor injuries. Finally, John reconciles with his wife, and recalls euthanizing his own dying daughter, a poignant resolution to the harrowing events. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.